give you some reaction I've had from survivors first, Martin. This is from Elizabeth in Rotherham. She says, nothing transparent again. I'm back to the fight again. It's not enough at all. I'm sure we're just hearing the same old. They are taking part in covering the cover-up once again. She said, I'm sick of hearing about that 7-year inquiry, referring to the ICSA report. She said her immediate jerk reaction was that this is not compelling, it's a whitewash. And she does agree with Chris Philp. She says it's inadequate. I'm also told that there is going to be further reaction from survivors in Oldham who did meet with the Safeguarding Minister, Jess Phillips, a meeting that we were aware of at GB News for some time. We were waiting to see what would come out of that meeting. 2 survivors who attended that told me, language I can't broadcast, but they didn't think it was sufficient, the meeting that they had. We're hearing now also, of course, I think the key part there, just from that statement at the House, quite an extraordinary exchange, was from Sarah Champion, the Labour MP for Rotherham. I'd say actually the more effective questioner of Yvette Cooper there, more effective than the Tory opposition, because she challenged Yvette Cooper on the cost. Telford alone cost £8 million, but there's £5 million for the whole thing here. How's that going to be happening? She also says, we know this is happening nationally, but it's just 5 local reviews. How strange to see a Labour MP on the backbenches supporting a Tory opposition point, which is that we know through GB News reporting and the court documents and everything that's out in the open, frankly, that this has happened in up to 50 different towns and cities. How is 5 local reviews sufficient? Sarah Champion earlier in the week said that there should be government-backed local reviews in every area where a sufficient limit is sparked and we know that there is a problem going on. She also said, I don't believe this is only happening in England and Wales. And she's right. We know survivors at GB News from Wales. They've spoken to us before. But also in Scotland as well. There was a conviction of a grooming gang last week in Dundee, which was a conviction that happened in the High Court in Glasgow. Now, Yvette Cooper says we're not redoing the Telford inquiry, but it's that top line from Sarah Champion, isn't it? A big strand, she says, is to make sure there have been no cover-ups. That's what the public have been saying. That's what some Labour MPs have been saying. She says that she wants statutory footing for all of these inquiries, saying that that's what the Telford inquiry lacked. That's what Greater Manchester lacked, the ability to compel witnesses. But when asked if that would be the case here, Yvette Cooper said that she would look into a accountability framework. I'm not sure how that will wash with survivors who really are very keen on those who failed them being compelled to give evidence and held to account. But Martin, I'll just go back to what you were raising before, some of the announcements that we've got here. That additional funding to tackle the grooming gangs and the reference to the ICSA inquiries. So there's 20 recommendations. There was a statement there from Sarah Champion again saying, will they specifically refer to the grooming gang section? We know that she described the ICSA strand on grooming gangs as a nonsense. Nazir Afzal described them as a nonsense in 2020. She said that it was an insufficient inquiry. It was a missed opportunity in her view. So she clearly wants to widen the remit of ICSA, as it were, to look into this properly. We saw her announcement in the week calling for a commission to work out the motivation of those crimes. There's also concern, is there not, about the ethnicity data. Now, the government have said today that they will work with the Child Sexual Exploitation Task Force, the NCA-led task force, to make immediate improvements to the collection of ethnicity data. These were concerns raised when the task force was launched in April 2023. But I think the next time we're going to see something major on this is the back of this 3-month rapid audit overseen by Baroness Louise Casey. She's the reviewer who looked into Rotherham Council in 2015 and found cover-ups by many, including Labour politicians. She says that this will be independent of the Home Office and it will draw on existing evidence on the national scale and nature of child sexual exploitation. So, Martin, we're starting with 5 reviews here, 5 local reviews. But if Baroness Louise Casey looks independently at this, as she has done before in Rotherham specifically, finds concerning data from the Home Office, then perhaps that could lead to more. But one quick point on that, Martin. We had a Home Office review into the grooming gangs in 2020, which survivors have described as a whitewash. whitewash.
Yep.
Because it limply said that they did not have ethnicity data, they couldn't draw any firm conclusions on this scandal, and they sort of left it there. This has been used by people who denied the extent of this problem for many years, ever since the news coverage of that report. So many questions here. A lot more questions actually have been asked, I think, by that statement than have been answered by them. Interesting also to see the inclusion of Tom Crowther, the man who led the Telford inquiry, a great success that found 1,000 victims. But again, survivors there, it didn't lead to justice. It didn't lead to accountability, just more information. But there will be additional national support for local inquiries, with Tom Crowther supporting them, including funding to support local areas to develop those Telford-style inquiries. But what we're hearing from survivors and campaigners, and I think we've just heard it from Sarah Champion so many times, is that these inquiries just aren't sufficient because they can't compel witnesses. They don't ensure that people are speaking under oath. And Oldham Council will be one of those 5 areas that will test and develop that new approach. But again, that is not what the Oldham survivors have demanded. They want a government-led inquiry, not locally led inquiry, and they want to ensure that people are compelled to give evidence. When the 2020 review into Oldham was published by Greater Manchester Combined Authority, they described it as a cover-up. They certainly don't want another one of those.
Charlie Peters, there's a phrase about the definition of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome. This is the same thing, and they're expecting a different outcome. More to the point, Charlie Peters, I'm trying my best to keep my calm here, Charlie. Do they think we're stupid? Do they think we're going to fall for this anymore? This is a very narrow focus, only 5 towns out of 50. There's nowhere near enough money to do the job. There's not even enough money to do 1 town. If you add in inflation compared to what Telford costs, it has no statutory powers. People can't be compelled to give evidence. We don't know who's going to call the witnesses. We don't know who's not going to be called. We don't know, for example, if people from the past might not be called up because, hey, they were on the council at the same time. Who's running the inquiry? Does it have any power? Will anybody go to jail? We don't want a report that tells us there were shortfalls. We don't want a report saying mistakes must not be repeated. We know this. We know this information. Charlie Peters, people have got to go to jail. People have got to be punished for what happened, for their shortfalls. And you've got the Tory party and the Labour Party once again today playing tit-for-tat politics. I'm not surprised that survivors are furious. I'm furious. And I think anybody watching this show should feel furious. This feels like yet another whitewash. It really does.
A problem for Labour politically, Martin, is that because the Prime Minister last Monday did come out and say that those calling for a national inquiry were jumping on the bandwagon of those spreading poison by the far right, it became immediately very difficult for them to climb down from that position. This government absolutely will not want to be seen to be forced into a U-turn by Elon Musk's sharing coverage of this issue, especially after that line about it being online commentators spreading the poison of the far right. That's also a line that the leader of Oldham Council, Arood Shah, a Labour councillor, said last Friday. She said that far-right commentators and politicians had descended on Oldham. I was there for a couple of days last week. I didn't see anyone descending from the far-right onto Oldham. But a former senior government advisor spoke to me about a couple of hours ago about this proposal, and they said to me, punt, delay, evade, and hope interest dies out with Elon getting busy in the United States with this new incoming Trump administration. I have to say, Martin, though, I'm not sure that if that is the government's strategy, and of course they'll deny that, I'm not sure it's going to work, because the level of anger on this scandal, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, is extreme. And the polling we've seen is very clear. Even Labour voters thinking that there's been a cover-up, and even Labour voters wanting people going to be imprisoned for being engaging in that cover-up. So a local inquiry that doesn't require people to actually give evidence, I'm not sure that will satisfy that level of public interest and anger in this nationwide atrocity.
Charlie Peters, so long as there's breath in my body, we're not going to stop covering this. And I suspect you're the same. And I suspect it's the same for many, many, many people watching the show today. Charlie Peters, today, I just think was wholly insufficient. Thank you for your analysis. We'll come back to you later in the show.